The wedding planner's office smelled like vanilla candles and desperation. Mostly mine. I sat in the plush cream chair, my threadbare coat creating an embarrassing contrast against the luxury surrounding me, fingers twisting the fake engagement ring I'd bought at a dollar store 3 days ago. The metal had already turned my skin green. "Miss Carter, I need to be clear," the wedding planner said, her manicured nails tapping against her leather portfolio. "A wedding of this caliber, on such short notice, will cost approximately—" "Money isn't an issue," I lied, my voice steadier than my hands. "I just need it done in 3 weeks. 3 weeks until my grandmother's 80th birthday. 3 weeks until I'd have to face my entire family and admit that the fiancé I'd invented, the successful businessman I'd described in elaborate detail over dozens of phone calls, didn't exist. 3 weeks until they'd look at me with that familiar mixture of pity and disappointment that had followed me my entire life. I left the office with a folder full of vendor contacts I couldn't afford, and a knot of anxiety tightening in my chest. The late October air bit through my thin coat as I walked toward the bus stop, my breath forming small clouds in the darkening evening. I'd solve this. Somehow. I always did. That's when I heard it. The sharp crack of a gunshot echoing through the narrow alley beside me. My body froze. Every survival instinct screaming contradicting commands. Run. Hide. Don't move. The sound of scuffling followed, then a heavy thud. Before my rational mind could stop me, I was moving toward the sound, my phone already in my hand, fingers hovering over 911. I peered around the corner of the alley, and my breath caught. A man stood in the shadows, backlit by a single flickering streetlight. Even in silhouette, he radiated something that made my skin prickle. Power, danger, control. He wore a black suit that probably cost more than my entire year's rent, the fabric catching the dim light as he moved. 3 other men flanked him, all dressed similarly, all watching as a 4th man lay crumpled on the ground, clutching his leg and whimpering. "I hate repeating myself, Marco," the man in the center said, his voice smooth, almost gentle. That gentleness made it more terrifying. "Where's the money?" I should have left, should have turned around and pretended I'd seen nothing. But my stupid, clumsy body betrayed me. My foot caught on an overturned crate, sending it scraping across the concrete with a sound that seemed to echo like thunder. Every head turned toward me. The man in the center stepped forward, and the streetlight finally caught his face. Strong jaw, dark eyes that seemed to absorb all light rather than reflect it. A thin scar cutting through his left eyebrow. He was beautiful in the way a blade is beautiful. Sharp, dangerous, mesmerizing. "Well," he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice, even though his expression remained neutral. "What do we have here?" I'm sorry," I stammered, taking a step back. "I didn't see anything. I was just walking through an alley in this neighborhood at night." He moved closer, and I caught the scent of expensive cologne mixed with something darker. Gunpowder, maybe, or smoke. "Alone?" One of his men moved to intercept me, but the man in the center raised a hand, stopping him with just that small gesture. The immediate obedience sent a chill down my spine. "I'm just passing through," I said, hating how my voice shook. "I won't say anything to anyone, I promise." He studied me for a long moment, those dark eyes cataloging every detail, my cheap coat, my worn shoes, the folder clutched against my chest like a shield. Then his gaze dropped to my hand, to the fake ring that caught the streetlight, and probably looked even more pathetic in this moment. "You're engaged," he observed. "Yes," I said too quickly. "Very engaged. He's waiting for me, actually. Right now. Very close by." "Is he?" Something flickered across his face, amusement maybe. "And yet you're walking alone through one of the most dangerous neighborhoods in the city." I took a wrong turn, clearly. He moved closer still, and I could see now that his suit was perfectly tailored. Not a thread out of place despite whatever had just happened in this alley. "You saw something tonight. That makes you a liability." My heart hammered against my ribs. "I didn't see anything. I don't even know who you are." "No?" He tilted his head slightly. "You don't recognize me?" I shook my head, genuinely confused. For the first time, he smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "Good. Let's keep it that way. He turned to one of his men. Dante, escort Miss... What's your name? Elena, I whispered, then immediately regretted giving it. Elena, he repeated, as if testing how it sounded. Escort Miss Carter home. Make sure she arrives safely. That's not necessary, I protested. But the man, Dante, was already moving toward a black SUV parked at the end of the alley, clearly expecting me to follow. I insist, the man in the center said, and there was steel beneath the courtesy. After all, your fiancé would never forgive me if something happened to you in this neighborhood. Consider it my wedding gift. The way he said it made my skin crawl and flush with heat simultaneously. He knew I was lying. I didn't know how, but he knew. Thank you, I managed, moving toward the SUV on shaking legs. I didn't look back as Dante opened the door for me, but I could feel those dark eyes watching until we pulled away. Only when we'd driven several blocks did I realize I was still clutching the wedding planner's folder, my knuckles white against the leather. Dante drove in silence, his eyes occasionally flicking to the rearview mirror to check on me. The SUV was pristine, all black leather and tinted windows. A rosary hung from the mirror, swaying with each turn. Where to? He asked, his voice gruff but not unkind. I gave him my address. A studio apartment in a building with broken elevators and questionable heating. The contrast between this vehicle and my destination would be laughable if I wasn't still shaking from adrenaline. When we pulled up outside my building, Dante handed me a card. Simple, black, with just a phone number embossed in silver. What's this? I asked. The boss said you might need it. The boss? The word felt strange in my mouth. I don't even know who he is. Dante's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe, or respect. Keep it anyway. I took the card with trembling fingers and climbed out of the SUV. It didn't pull away until I was inside the building, the sound of its engine fading only after I'd climbed 3 flights of stairs to my apartment. Inside, I locked the door and leaned against it, my heart still racing. The card felt heavy in my pocket, like it carried more weight than simple cardstock should. I pulled it out, staring at the number. What kind of man hands out cards after holding someone at gunpoint in an alley? What kind of woman keeps that card instead of going straight to the police? The kind who was desperate enough to hire a fake fiancé, apparently. The thought came unbidden, ridiculous. But as I looked around my tiny apartment, at the stack of bills on my counter, and the wedding planner's folder with its impossible prices, the idea didn't seem quite as insane as it should have. He clearly had money. He'd seen through my lies immediately, which meant he understood deception, and something about the way he'd looked at me, studied me, suggested he might find the whole situation interesting. I laughed at myself, shaking my head. The stress was clearly making me delusional. You didn't hire a man you'd seen threatening someone in an alley to pretend to be your fiancé? That was insane. Dangerous. Potentially deadly. I set the card on my counter and tried to forget about it. 3 days later, after my grandmother called to ask about meeting my fiancé, after the wedding planner sent a deposit request I couldn't possibly pay, after I'd lain awake every night seeing those dark eyes in the shadows of my ceiling, I picked up the card. My hands shook as I dialed the number. It rang twice before a voice answered. Not him. Someone else. Cool and professional. State your business. I need to speak with the man who gave me this number, about a business proposition. A pause. Your name. Elena Carter. Another pause, longer this time. Hold. The silence stretched for nearly a minute before a different voice came on the line. His voice. Smooth and dark as aged whiskey. Miss Carter. I was wondering when you'd call. My breath caught. You were expecting me? A woman who lies to a wedding planner about a fiancé who doesn't exist, then stumbles into an alley she shouldn't have been in? Yes, Elena. I was expecting you. He said my name like he'd been practicing it, like he enjoyed the taste of it on his tongue. Now, what can I do for you? I closed my eyes, taking a breath that felt like jumping off a cliff. I need a husband. Temporarily. For 3 weeks. And I'm willing to pay whatever you ask. The silence that followed made my heart stop. Then, So softly I almost didn't hear it. He laughed. Not the cold, mirthless sound from the alley, but something genuine, surprised. "Is that so?" he said. "Well then, Miss Carter, I think we should discuss this proposition in person. Tomorrow, 8 p.m. Dante will pick you up." "Wait, I didn't—" "Wear something nice," he said. "And Elena? Don't be late. I hate waiting." The line went dead. I stood frozen in my apartment, the phone still pressed to my ear, wondering what I'd just done. Outside my window, the city lights blurred through sudden tears. Whether from fear or relief or sheer insanity, I couldn't tell. All I knew was that I'd just made a deal with the devil, and he hadn't even told me his price. Dante arrived at exactly 8 p.m., the black SUV idling outside my building like a predator waiting for prey. I'd spent 2 hours getting ready, cycling through every piece of clothing I owned before settling on the only dress that didn't look like I'd bought it at a thrift store. A simple black sheath that I'd splurged on for job interviews I never got. My hands trembled as I applied mascara, nearly poking myself in the eye twice. This was insane. I was getting into a car with a man who worked for someone I'd seen threatening people with guns, but the alternative was facing my grandmother, my aunts, my cousins. All of them who'd watched me struggle and fail at everything I'd ever tried. And admitting I'd invented a fiancé because I was too pathetic to find a real one. The SUV's interior smelled like leather and something spicy. Cologne, maybe his cologne, and my stomach twisted with nerves. Dante didn't speak as we drove, but I caught him glancing at me in the mirror, something almost like concern in his eyes. "Where are we going?" I finally asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Ristorante Nero," he said. "The boss owns it." Of course he did. Of course a man who conducted business in alleys owned an Italian restaurant. Probably used it to launder money or whatever criminals did in movies. The restaurant sat in a part of the city I'd only seen in magazines, all old brick and ivy, with a discreet black awning and no sign. A valet appeared instantly as we pulled up, and Dante came around to open my door, offering his hand like I was someone who mattered. Inside, the restaurant was beautiful in a way that made my chest ache. Low lighting, exposed brick, tables spaced far enough apart for private conversations. A pianist played something soft and melancholy in the corner. The maitre d' took one look at Dante and led us through the dining room without a word, past curious glances from well-dressed diners to a private room in the back. He sat at a table set for two, a glass of red wine in his hand, looking like he'd been carved from marble and expensive fabric. The suit tonight was charcoal gray, perfectly tailored to shoulders that seemed broader than I'd remembered. His dark hair was pushed back from his face, and in the warm light, I could see the scar through his eyebrow more clearly, a thin white line that somehow made him more beautiful rather than less. He stood when I entered, and the gesture was so old-fashioned, so unexpectedly courteous, that I froze. "Elena," he said. And again, the way he said my name sent heat curling through my stomach. "You look lovely." "Thank you," I managed, letting Dante pull out my chair. The man, I still didn't know his name, dismissed Dante with a small nod, and suddenly we were alone, the door closing with a soft click that sounded terribly final. "Wine?" he asked, already pouring before I could answer. "It's a Barolo, 2015, one of my favorites." I took the glass with shaking hands, the wine probably costing more than my monthly grocery budget. He watched me over the rim of his own glass, those dark eyes missing nothing, not my cheap dress, not my nervousness, not the way my fingers twisted in my lap. "You said you needed a husband," he said, cutting straight to the point. "Temporarily, for 3 weeks. I'm curious about the specifics of this arrangement." I took a sip of wine for courage. It tasted like velvet and cherries, and things I couldn't afford. My grandmother is turning 80. There's a big party, family flying in from everywhere, and I told them I was engaged, to someone successful, someone who loved me, because I was tired of being the family disappointment. And this fiancé doesn't exist. No. The admission felt like swallowing glass. So you need someone to play the part. Convince your family. Then disappear after the party. He leaned back in his chair, studying me. What made you think of me? You have money, I said bluntly. You understand deception, and you didn't seem particularly shocked when you figured out I was lying about being engaged. I thought maybe this would be interesting to you. Like a game. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe. Or approval. Interesting. Most people who see what you saw in that alley either go to the police or try to forget it happened. You called and offered me money. I'm desperate, I said simply. And I got the impression that going to the police about you would be unwise. He smiled then, a real smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes and made my heart stutter. You're smarter than you look, Elena Carter. Is that a compliment? It's an observation. He set down his wine glass, and I noticed his hands. Strong, scarred knuckles, but elegant fingers. Hands that could threaten or caress with equal skill. Tell me about your family. What would I need to know to play this part convincingly? Hope flickered in my chest. Does that mean you'll do it? I haven't decided yet, but I'm intrigued. He gestured for me to continue. Talk. So I did. I told him about my grandmother, about how she'd raised me after my parents died when I was 10, about my cousins who were all doctors and lawyers and engineers, while I could barely hold down a job as a waitress, about how I'd invented this fiancé, James, I'd called him, a businessman who traveled frequently, during a phone call when my grandmother had sounded so worried about me being alone. And the lie grew, he said, understanding immediately. Every phone call, I'd add more details. His favorite food, how we met, what he'd said to me, until he felt more real than anything else in my life. I laughed bitterly. Pathetic, right? Lonely, he corrected, and the gentleness in his voice made my throat tight. There's a difference. A waiter appeared with plates of food I hadn't ordered. Fresh pasta with truffle oil, perfectly cooked seafood, vegetables that looked like art. The man waved the waiter away and pushed one plate toward me. Eat, he commanded softly. You're too thin. When was the last time you had a real meal? The question was too intimate, too knowing. I eat fine. You're lying again. He picked up his fork. I can always tell when you're lying, Elena. Your left eye twitches, just slightly. I touched my eye self-consciously, and he smiled. We ate in silence for a few minutes, and despite everything, the danger, the strangeness, the absolute insanity of this situation, the food was incredible. I couldn't remember the last time I'd tasted something so good. You still haven't told me your name, I said finally. He paused, his fork halfway to his mouth, then set it down carefully. No, I haven't. Why not? Because names have power, Elena. Once you know mine, truly know it, there's no going back from this. You become part of my world, whether you want to be or not. A chill ran down my spine. I just need you to pretend for 3 weeks. That's all. Then we go our separate ways. Is that what you think will happen? He leaned forward, and suddenly the space between us felt charged. Electric. You think you can walk into my world, use me for your purposes, and then walk away unscathed? I'm paying you, I said, trying to sound brave. This is a business transaction, and what are you offering to pay me with, Elena? His voice dropped lower, more intimate. You can barely afford rent. The wedding planner's deposit alone would bankrupt you. So what currency are you offering? My cheeks flamed. I'll find the money. I'll work extra shifts. I don't want your money. He said it so simply, so finally, that I froze. Then what do you want? He was quiet for a long moment, studying me with an intensity that made me feel naked despite being fully clothed. 3 weeks, you said, as your husband. Fake husband. He picked up his wine again, swirling it thoughtfully. Here's my counteroffer. I'll play your devoted fiancé. I'll convince your family that I'm madly in love with you. I'll give you the wedding of your grandmother's dreams. And in return, you'll give me the same 3 weeks. I don't understand. You'll live as my wife, in my home, under my protection. You'll attend events with me, meet my associates. You'll play the part as convincingly as I'll play mine. Why? The word came out as a whisper. Why would you want that? His expression shifted, something dark and complicated passing behind his eyes. Let's just say I have my own reasons for needing a wife, temporarily. And you, Elena Carter, with your terrible lies and desperate eyes, walked into my life at precisely the right moment. That doesn't answer my question? No, he agreed. It doesn't, but it's all the answer you're getting tonight. He extended his hand across the table. Do we have a deal? I stared at his hand, at the scars on his knuckles, at the gold watch on his wrist that probably cost more than everything I owned combined. This was insane, dangerous. I knew nothing about this man except that he was violent, powerful, and looking at me like I was something precious he wanted to keep. But I was out of options, out of time, out of everything except desperation and the crushing weight of disappointing everyone who'd ever loved me. I took his hand. His fingers closed around mine, warm and strong. And I felt the moment like a door slamming shut, locking me into something I didn't understand. 3 weeks, I said. Then I'm free. His thumb traced across my knuckles, a touch so gentle it made me shiver. 3 weeks, he agreed. But the way he said it made it sound like a promise of something else entirely. My name is Dominic Salvatore. The name hit me like cold water. Even I, with my carefully maintained ignorance of the city's underworld, had heard of the Salvatores, the family that controlled half the city's ports, that had politicians in their pockets, that made people disappear without a trace. I'd just agreed to marry the most dangerous man in the city. Don't look so terrified, Dominic said, his voice almost amused. I won't hurt you, Elena. You're under my protection now. That means something. What does it mean? It means, he said, standing and offering me his hand again, that anyone who even thinks about harming you will answer to me. It means you'll want for nothing. It means for the next 3 weeks you're mine to protect, to provide for, to... He paused, something heated flashing in his eyes. To cherish, as a husband should. The way he said, cherish, made my mouth go dry. Come, he said, still holding out his hand. Dante will take you home. Tomorrow, pack your things, everything you want to keep. I'll send people to collect you at noon. Tomorrow? But I thought... The 3 weeks start now, Elena. Why waste time? His smile was dangerous, beautiful. Besides, you need to get used to living as Mrs. Salvatore. It takes practice to lie convincingly. Mrs. Salvatore. The words made my head spin. I let him lead me out of the restaurant, his hand warm against the small of my back, a touch that was simultaneously possessive and protective. Dante was already waiting with the SUV, but before I could get in, Dominic caught my wrist, pulling me back. One more thing, he said, his voice low enough that only I could hear. While you're under my roof, you follow my rules. You don't leave without security. You don't talk to strangers about our arrangement. And you don't lie to me again, about anything. Understood? The command in his voice should have made me angry. Instead, it sent heat pooling low in my stomach. Understood. Good girl. He released me, and I climbed into the SUV on shaking legs. As Dante pulled away, I looked back through the tinted window. Dominic stood in front of his restaurant, hands in his pockets, watching me leave with an expression I couldn't read. The streetlight cast shadows across his face, making him look like something from a dream, or a nightmare. What had I just agreed to? 3 weeks as the wife of a Mafia boss. 3 weeks of lies built on lies. 3 weeks of being close to a man who made my pulse race with fear and something else I didn't want to name. I touched my wrist where he'd grabbed me, feeling the ghost of his fingers like a brand. Tomorrow, my life would change. Tomorrow, I'd step into Dominic Salvatore's world, and somehow, I knew that 3 weeks wouldn't be enough time to escape it. The penthouse was obscene in its luxury. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city like Dominic owned every building, every street, every soul below. Marble floors caught the afternoon light, throwing prisms across furniture that belonged in museums. The living room alone was larger than my entire apartment building. I stood in the entryway with my 2 pathetic suitcases, feeling like a smudge on a pristine canvas. Your room is this way, Dominic said, his hand again at the small of my back, guiding me down a hallway lined with abstract art that probably cost millions. He'd been waiting when his men arrived to collect me, dressed more casually today in dark slacks and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms corded with muscle and scattered with more scars. "My room?" I echoed. "We're not sharing a bed?" He glanced at me, amusement dancing in those dark eyes. "Not unless you ask very nicely, Elena." Heat flooded my cheeks. I didn't mean, relax. He pushed open a door, revealing a bedroom that took my breath away. A massive bed with silk sheets, another wall of windows, a bathroom visible through an open door that had a tub big enough to swim in. "You'll have your privacy. My room is at the other end of the hall." I stepped inside, my worn sneakers sinking into carpet so plush it felt like walking on clouds. "This is too much. You're my wife now. You'll get used to it." He set my suitcases on the bed, and they looked even more pathetic against the expensive linens. "Tonight, we have dinner with some of my associates. Consider it your first test." My stomach dropped. "Tonight? But I just got here. I need time to what? Prepare?" He moved closer, and I could smell his cologne again, that dark, spicy scent that made my head spin. "This is the preparation, Elena. You wanted me to play your devoted fiancée. Well, I need you to play my devoted bride. Starting now." "I don't know how to act around people like you," I admitted, hating how small my voice sounded. "People like me." He repeated the words slowly, something dangerous flickering across his face. "You mean criminals? Murderers? Monsters?" "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to." He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear with surprising gentleness. "But here's what you need to understand, Elena. In my world, perception is everything. If they sense weakness, they'll exploit it. If they think you're afraid of me, they'll wonder why. And if they wonder why, they'll start asking questions we don't want answered. So what do? You trust me." His fingers trailed down my jaw, tilting my face up to meet his gaze. "You look at me like I'm the only man in the room. You let me touch you, guide you, protect you. You play the part of a woman who's so in love with her husband that nothing else matters." The way he said it, the intensity in his eyes, made my breath catch. "And what will you do?" "I'll make sure everyone believes it." His thumb brushed across my lower lip, and I shivered. "I'm very good at making people believe things, Elena." A knock on the door broke the moment. Dante entered, his expression carefully neutral. "Boss, the shipment from—" He stopped, glancing at me. "It's fine," Dominic said, not looking away from me. "She's family now. She hears everything." Family. The word sent a strange thrill through me. Dante nodded. "The shipment from Castellano arrived, but 3 crates are missing." Something cold settled over Dominic's features, his entire demeanor shifting in an instant. The man who'd been touching me gently became someone else, someone harder, more dangerous. "Missing or stolen? We're not sure yet. Find out." The command was soft, deadly. "And Dante? When you do find out, bring whoever's responsible to me. Alive." Dante left, and the silence felt heavy. I watched Dominic, seeing the monster beneath the gentleman, and wondered which version was real. Maybe they both were. Maybe that was what made him so dangerous. "You're afraid now," he observed, turning back to me. "I can see it in your eyes. Should I be? Of me? No." He stepped closer again, crowding me against the bed. "But you should be smart enough to remember what I am, Elena, what I'm capable of. The world I'm bringing you into isn't kind to innocence. Then why bring me into it at all?" For a moment, something vulnerable flickered across his face. "Because I'm a selfish bastard who saw something he wanted and took it." His hand cupped my cheek, thumb stroking across my skin. "And because you're stronger than you think. I saw it that night in the alley. You were terrified. But you didn't run, didn't scream. You stood there and lied to my face with a courage most men don't have. That wasn't courage. That was stupidity. Sometimes they're the same thing." He pulled back, the intimate moment ending as quickly as it began. "Rest. We leave at 7. And Elena, there's a closet full of clothes for you. Wear the red dress. It'll make the right impression." He left before I could argue, the door closing softly behind him. I collapsed onto the bed, my heart racing. What had I gotten myself into? 3 weeks suddenly felt like a lifetime. The red dress fit like it had been made for my body, because it probably had been. Somehow Dominic had known my exact measurements. The knowledge should have creeped me out. Instead, it sent a confusing mix of emotions through my chest as I stared at myself in the mirror. I looked different, expensive, the kind of woman who belonged on a man like Dominic Salvatore's arm. A knock on the door made me jump. "Come in," I called, expecting Dante. It was Dominic. He stood in the doorway, dressed in a black suit that made him look like sin personified, and the way his eyes traveled over me made my skin burn. "Perfect," he murmured, moving into the room. "But you're missing something." He pulled a jewelry box from his pocket, opening it to reveal a necklace that made my breath stop. Diamonds and rubies woven together in an intricate pattern, the kind of piece you saw in museums under glass. "I can't wear that," I whispered. "It's too much." "You're my wife. It's expected." He moved behind me, and I watched in the mirror as he fastened the necklace around my throat. His fingers brushed against my skin, and I shivered. "There. Now you look the part." The necklace sat heavy and cold against my collarbone, a beautiful chain. Looking at our reflection, him in his dark suit, me in red and diamonds, his hands on my shoulders, we looked like we belonged together. Like the lie was truth. "Who are these people we're meeting?" I asked, trying to focus on anything except how close he was standing. "Business associates. They've been asking questions about my personal life. Tonight, you're the answer to those questions." His eyes met mine in the mirror. "Some of them will try to intimidate you. Others will try to charm you. All of them will be watching for weakness. What if I mess up? You won't." His hands tightened on my shoulders. "Because I'll be right beside you, always. Just remember, you're mine. Act like it." The possessiveness in his voice should have bothered me. Instead, it sent heat pooling low in my belly. The restaurant was different from Ristorante Nero. Older, darker, the kind of place where deals were made and secrets were kept. Dominic kept his hand on my lower back as we entered, and I felt eyes turning toward us, assessing, calculating. A table of 5 men stood as we approached. All of them wore expensive suits. All of them had the same dangerous edge as Dominic, but none of them had his presence. He commanded the room without saying a word. "Gentlemen," Dominic said smoothly, "I'd like you to meet my wife, Elena." Wife, not fiancé. The change made my pulse quicken. Wife. One of the men, silver-haired with sharp eyes, smiled. "You move fast, Salvatore. We didn't even know you were engaged. When you know, you know." Dominic pulled out my chair, his hand lingering on my shoulder as I sat. "Elena's family is from the old country. We wanted to keep things traditional, private." The lie rolled off his tongue so smoothly I almost believed it myself. Dinner was a chess match played with words and wine. The men asked questions: where I was from, how we met, what I did. Dominic answered most of them, weaving a story so detailed and convincing that I started to wonder if he'd planned this long before I'd called him. "And what do you think of your husband's business?" The silver-haired man, Carmine I'd learned, asked me directly. The table went quiet. This was a test. I felt Dominic's hand find my thigh under the table, a gentle squeeze of encouragement. "I think," I said carefully, "that my husband is very good at what he does, and I trust him completely. Even though his business is complicated?" "All business is complicated, Mr. Carmine. My husband's is just more honest about it." Silence. Then Carmine laughed, a genuine sound that broke the tension. "She's got fire, Salvatore. I like her." Under the table, Dominic's hand squeezed my thigh again, higher this time, almost intimate. Pride radiated from him. The rest of dinner passed more easily, but I remained hyper-aware of Dominic beside me, how he touched me constantly. Small gestures of possession that felt increasingly natural, a hand on my back, fingers brushing my arm, his thigh pressed against mine under the table. When dessert arrived, one of the younger men, Marco, barely older than me with cruel eyes, leaned forward. "So, Elena, what's it like being married to the most dangerous man in the city?" Doesn't it keep you up at night? The question was meant to unsettle me. I saw it in his smirk, in the way the others watched for my reaction. Dominic's hand tightened on my thigh. A warning, but I didn't need protecting. Actually, I said, meeting Marco's gaze steadily. I sleep very well, because I know that anyone stupid enough to threaten me would have to answer to him. And I've seen what happens to people who cross my husband. The reference to the alley was subtle, but Dominic caught it. I felt him go still beside me. Marco's smirk faded. Is that a threat? It's an observation. I took a sip of wine, channeling every ounce of false confidence I'd ever possessed. My husband protects what's his, completely, utterly, without mercy. It's one of the things I love most about him. I turned to look at Dominic, and what I saw in his eyes made my breath catch. Heat. Pride. Something darker and more possessive that made my stomach flip. He leaned in, his lips brushing my ear as he whispered, "You're playing a dangerous game, Mrs. Salvatore." "I learned from the best," I whispered back. His hand slid higher on my thigh, and I bit back a gasp. The dinner ended soon after. As we left, Dominic's arm around my waist, Carmine pulled him aside. "She's good for you," I heard him say. "Real. Don't fuck it up." "I won't," Dominic replied, and the certainty in his voice sent shivers down my spine. In the car, the privacy partition rose, sealing us in darkness. Dominic pulled me across the seat, into his lap, and my heart hammered against my ribs. "That was incredible," he said, his hands framing my face. "You were perfect. Better than perfect. Do you know what you did in there? I just said what felt right. You claimed me." His thumb traced my lower lip. "In front of men who respect nothing but power, you claimed me as yours. Do you understand what that means?" I shook my head, unable to speak with him this close. "It means they believe us, completely. It means you're protected in ways you can't imagine. And it means," his voice dropped lower, rougher, "that I'm going to have a very hard time remembering this is supposed to be fake." His words hung in the air between us, heavy with implication. I could feel his heart beating beneath my palms, could see the way his pupils had dilated, could feel the tension in his body. "Dominic," I whispered, not sure if it was a warning or a plea. He closed his eyes, taking a shuddering breath. Then, with visible effort, he lifted me off his lap and set me carefully back on the seat beside him. "We should maintain some boundaries," he said, his voice strained. "For both our sakes." I nodded, unable to trust my voice, my body still humming from his touch. But as the car pulled up to the penthouse, as he helped me out with a hand that lingered too long on mine, I wondered if boundaries were already something we'd left behind. 3 weeks suddenly felt both too long and not long enough. The next 2 weeks blurred together in a haze of expensive dinners, charity galas, and increasingly intimate touches that felt less like acting with each passing day. Dominic was everywhere, a constant presence that both thrilled and terrified me. He'd wake me with coffee made exactly how I liked it, though I'd never told him. He'd have lunch sent up while I worked on wedding plans with a coordinator who appeared at the penthouse with samples of flowers and cakes I couldn't pronounce. He'd come home late, smelling of smoke and danger, and find me curled up on the couch, always touching me. My hair, my shoulder, my hand, like he needed to confirm I was real. And I was falling for him, God help me. I was falling for a man who'd threatened someone with a gun, who made people disappear, who controlled half the city with violence and fear. But he was also the man who noticed when I couldn't sleep and sat with me in the dark, telling me stories about his childhood in Sicily, who bought out an entire bookstore when he caught me looking longingly at a novel I couldn't afford, who touched me like I was something precious, something worth protecting. The wedding was in 3 days. My grandmother would arrive tomorrow, along with my entire family. The lie was about to become very, very real. I stood at the penthouse windows, watching the city lights blur through tears I didn't want to acknowledge. Behind me, I heard the door open, Dominic's footsteps crossing the marble. "You're upset," he said, coming to stand behind me. Not touching, but close enough that I could feel his heat. "I'm fine." "You're lying," His reflection appeared in the glass beside mine. Your left eye is twitching. Despite everything, I smiled. You and that tell. What's wrong, Elena? His hands settled on my shoulders, thumbs rubbing gentle circles. Talk to me. This is all getting too real, I admitted. My family arrives tomorrow. We're getting married in 3 days. And then what? It ends? We just go back to pretending we never knew each other? His hands stilled. Is that what you want? I don't know what I want anymore. I turned to face him, and the vulnerability in his eyes nearly undid me. You're not what I expected, Dominic. You're supposed to be this monster, this dangerous criminal, but you're... What? His voice was rough. What am I, Elena? Kind, I whispered. You're kind to me. And I don't know if it's real or part of the game we're playing, and I'm terrified because I'm starting not to care. Something shifted in his expression. Relief, maybe, or hunger. You want to know what's real? He cupped my face in his hands, tilting my head back to meet his gaze. This. The way I can't stop thinking about you. The way I come home earlier than I need to because I want to see you. The way I want to kill any man who looks at you too long. That's real, Elena. Too fucking real. My breath caught. Dominic. I wasn't supposed to care about you, he continued, his voice low and intense. You were supposed to be a means to an end. I needed a wife to convince some very dangerous people that I was settling down, becoming respectable. But then, you walked into that alley, scared and lying and so goddamn brave, and I couldn't stop myself. From what? From wanting you. His thumb traced my lower lip. From needing you. From planning ways to keep you here long after these 3 weeks are over. The confession hung between us, charged and dangerous. I should have been afraid. Should have pulled away. Instead, I found myself leaning closer. The wedding, I whispered. It's supposed to be fake. I know. But my grandmother will be there. My family. They'll think it's real. I know. And after the 3 weeks, don't. His forehead pressed against mine. Don't think about after. Not tonight. He was giving me an out, a chance to step back from this precipice we were both standing on. But I'd been standing at the edge for 2 weeks, and I was tired of being afraid. I kissed him. Or he kissed me. I wasn't sure who moved first, only that his mouth was on mine, and the world tilted sideways. He tasted like whiskey and darkness, and something addictive I'd been craving without knowing it. His hands tangled in my hair, tilting my head to deepen the kiss, and I melted against him, with a sound that was half gasp, half surrender. Elena, he groaned against my lips. If we do this, there's no going back. You understand that? I don't want to go back, I breathed. And it was the most honest thing I'd said since meeting him. He lifted me effortlessly, my legs wrapping around his waist as he carried me down the hallway. Not to my room, I realized, to his. The symbolism wasn't lost on either of us. His bedroom was dark, masculine, dominated by a massive bed I'd imagined more times than I wanted to admit. He laid me down on sheets that smelled like him, covering my body with his, and every touch, every kiss felt like a promise and a threat. I'm not a good man, he whispered against my throat. I've done terrible things, hurt people, killed people. You should run from me, Elena. I'm not running. My hands slid under his shirt, feeling the scars I'd wondered about, the muscles that tensed under my touch. I'm choosing you. Right now. This moment. I'm choosing you. Something broke in him at those words. The careful control he'd maintained shattered, and he claimed me with a possessive hunger that should have frightened me but instead made me feel cherished, wanted, protected. He learned my body like he learned everything else, with intense focus and devastating precision. Every touch calculated to make me gasp, every kiss designed to leave me breathless. And when he finally pushed inside me, filling me completely, his eyes never left mine. Mine, he growled, moving with a controlled power that made stars explode behind my eyes. Say it, Elena. Say you're mine. Yours, I gasped, nails digging into his shoulders. I'm yours, Dominic. Only yours. The words unlocked something primal in him. He made love to me like he did everything else, with complete dominance and surprising tenderness, pushing me higher and higher until I shattered in his arms, his name a prayer on my lips. After, wrapped in his arms with my head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat slow, I felt the walls I'd built around myself crumble completely. I love you, I whispered into the darkness, not expecting him to hear, not brave enough to say it louder. But his arms tightened around me. I know, he murmured against my hair. I've known for a while. And Elena? I love you too. More than I should. More than is safe for either of us. I tilted my head to look at him. What does that mean? It means, he said, his expression serious, that I'm keeping you. Not for 3 weeks. Not for show. Forever. And I'll burn down anyone who tries to take you from me. The declaration should have scared me. Instead, it felt like coming home. My grandmother arrived the next morning like a tiny, elegant hurricane. Maria Santos was 79, stood barely 5 feet tall, and had raised me with an iron will wrapped in unconditional love. She took one look at the penthouse, at Dominic standing beside me with his hand on my lower back, and her eyes went sharp with assessment. So? She said in Portuguese, which Dominic shouldn't have understood. This is the businessman you told me about. Yes, Vovô, I replied in the same language. This is Dominic. She studied him for a long moment, then switched to English. You love my granddaughter? Dominic didn't hesitate. More than my own life, Senora. Good. Because if you hurt her, I will find a way to hurt you back. I am old, but I know people. The threat was delivered with a sweet smile. To my shock, Dominic laughed, a genuine warm sound I'd rarely heard. I believe you would, Senora, and I respect that. Somehow that answer satisfied her. She pulled me into a hug that smelled like her lavender perfume and whispered in my ear, he looks at you like your grandfather looked at me. Like you are his whole world. Hold on to that, Mina Neta. The rest of my family arrived throughout the day. Cousins, aunts, uncles, all of them curious about this mysterious fiancé I'd kept secret. Dominic handled them all with the same charm he used on his associates, but I could see the difference. With them, he was genuine, warm. He asked my cousin about her medical practice, discussed architecture with my uncle, even played with my youngest nephew, letting the boy climb all over him without complaint. He's wonderful, my Aunt Maria whispered to me, watching Dominic laugh at something my cousin said. How did you find him? I wasn't looking, I admitted. He just appeared when I needed him most. It was more true than she knew. That night, after everyone had left, Dominic found me on the balcony. The wedding was tomorrow. In less than 24 hours, I'd be walking down an aisle toward a man who'd entered my life as a lie and become my truth. Nervous? He asked, handing me a glass of wine. Terrified, I admitted. What if someone figures out how this started? What if they realize... Elena, he turned me to face him. No one is going to realize anything except that I'm madly in love with my wife, because that's the truth. But the beginning doesn't matter. His hands framed my face. We chose each other. Maybe the circumstances were unusual, but the result is real. You're real. This is real. Everything else is just details. Details that involve you being a mafia boss. About that. He took a breath. After the wedding, I'm stepping back. Not leaving the family business entirely. That's not possible. But I'm delegating more, taking fewer risks, because you've made me want something I never thought I'd have. What's that? A future. His smile was soft, vulnerable. A life that doesn't end in violence. Maybe even... He paused, looking almost shy. Children. Someday. The image hit me hard, if you want that. Dominic with our child. The same tenderness I'd seen with my nephew, but magnified. I want that, I whispered. I want everything with you. He kissed me then, soft and sweet, a promise sealed with touch. But as I fell asleep in his arms that night, a part of me whispered that happiness this perfect couldn't last, that the danger Dominic lived with would eventually find us. I should have listened to that whisper. The morning of the wedding, I woke alone. A note on Dominic's pillow read, "Tradition says I shouldn't see you until the ceremony, but know that I'm counting every second until you're officially mine, D." I smiled, pressing the note to my chest, then started getting ready. My grandmother helped, her gentle hands fixing my veil, her eyes bright with tears. "You look just like your mother did on her wedding day," she whispered. "She would be so proud of you, Minanera." The wedding was small, just family and a few of Dominic's associates, held in a private garden he'd rented out. White flowers everywhere, string lights turning the evening into magic. As I walked down the aisle on my uncle's arm, I saw Dominic waiting at the altar. He wore a black tuxedo that made him look like sin and salvation combined, but it was his expression that stopped my heart. Awe, love, possession. Like I was the only thing in the world that mattered. When I reached him, he took my hand, and I felt it again. That sense of rightness, of coming home. The ceremony was traditional, beautiful. But as we exchanged vows, promises that had started as lies but had become truth somewhere along the way, I saw movement at the edge of my vision. A man I didn't recognize, watching from the shadows. He caught my eye and smiled, a cruel, cold smile that made my blood freeze. Then he was gone. "Elena?" Dominic's voice pulled me back. "Are you all right?" I looked at him, at the concern in his dark eyes, and decided not to ruin this moment. Probably nothing. Just paranoia. "I'm perfect," I whispered. He kissed me then, sealing our vows, and the garden erupted in applause. As he pulled me close, his lips against my ear, he whispered, "Mine. Forever." "Forever," I agreed. But even as I smiled and celebrated, even as I danced with my new husband under the stars, I couldn't shake the memory of that stranger's
Danger was
smile.
coming.
I just didn't know it would arrive so soon. The threat came 3 days after the wedding. I was alone in the penthouse. Dominic had gone to a meeting he'd promised would be his last before stepping back, and Dante was stationed outside the door. My grandmother had flown home that morning, tearful and happy, convinced her granddaughter had found true love. She wasn't wrong, but she also didn't know the whole truth. I was reviewing thank you notes when my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Beautiful wedding, Mrs. Salvatore. Shame it won't last." Attached was a photo, me in my wedding dress, Dominic's hand on my waist, but it was taken from an angle that suggested the photographer had been hidden in the garden, watching, waiting. My hands shook as I called Dominic. He answered on the first ring. "Elena? What's wrong?" I got a text. A threat, I think. "There's a photo from the wedding. Don't touch anything else. I'm coming home. Now." His voice had gone cold, deadly. "Dante is outside your door. Don't let anyone else in. No one. Understand? Dominic, you're scaring me." "Good. Fear keeps you careful." A pause, then softer. "I'll be there in 10 minutes. I love you." The line went dead. Those 10 minutes felt like hours. I paced the living room, jumping at every sound, my mind racing through possibilities. Who would threaten me? Why? What did they want? When Dominic finally burst through the door, he wasn't alone. Carmine and 2 other men I'd met at various dinners followed him in, all of them armed. The sight of guns in our home made this nightmare suddenly, terrifyingly real. Dominic pulled me into his arms, his hands running over me like he was checking for injuries. "You're okay. You're okay." It sounded like he was reassuring himself more than me. "I'm fine. It was just a text. Show me." I handed him my phone. His expression went murderous as he read the message, studied the photo. "Marco," he said quietly, the name a death sentence. "The guy from dinner?" I remembered those cruel eyes, the way he'd tried to intimidate me. He's been pushing boundaries for months, questioning my decisions, challenging my authority. Dominic's jaw clenched, and now he's threatening what's mine. Carmine stepped forward. "He knows the rules, Dominic. Families are off limits. This is a declaration of war, then we give him one." Dominic's voice was ice. "But first, Elena needs to be somewhere safe. I'm not leaving you," I said immediately. "Elena, No, I grabbed his arm, forcing him to look at me. You said I was yours, that we were in this together. You don't get to shut me out now just because it's dangerous. Something flickered in his eyes, pride, maybe, mixed with fear. You don't understand what this means. What I'll have to do. Then explain it to me. He was quiet for a long moment, his thumb tracing circles on my wrist. Finally, he nodded. Carmine, sweep the building. Make sure we're secure. Then find Marco. I want him brought to the warehouse, alive. The men left, and suddenly we were alone in the too quiet penthouse. Talk to me, I said softly. What's really happening here? Dominic led me to the couch, pulling me down beside him. Marco's been trying to take over my territory for months. I thought I had it handled, that showing him I was settling down would make him back off. Instead, it gave him a target. His hands fisted. You. He's going after you to get to me. So what do? I end this, tonight, permanently. He looked at me, and I saw the monster he tried to hide, the killer, the crime lord, the man who ruled through fear. I need you to understand what that means, Elena. I'm going to hurt him, probably kill him. Can you live with that? Can you still love me knowing what I'm capable of? I thought about the man who'd threatened me, who'd watched my wedding from the shadows, who'd made Dominic look at me with such fear. Then I thought about the man who'd held me through nightmares, who'd charmed my grandmother, who'd promised me a future. Yes, I said simply. Because you're protecting us. Our future. That's what husbands do, right? His kiss was desperate, grateful, claiming. I don't deserve you. Too bad. You're stuck with me. I pulled back, holding his face in my hands. But promise me something. Promise me you'll come back to me. No matter what happens tonight, you'll come back. Always, he vowed. You're my home, Elena. I'll always come back to you. The next few hours were a blur of activity. More men arrived. Dominic's most trusted soldiers, all of them grim-faced and armed. The penthouse became a fortress, and through it all, Dominic kept me close, his hand always touching some part of me, like he needed the contact to stay grounded. Finally, Dante returned. We found him. He's at the warehouse. Dominic stood, and I saw the transformation, the loving husband disappearing beneath the Mafia boss. Elena, you stay here with 2 guards. Don't leave this apartment for any reason. Be careful, I whispered, kissing him one more time. I love you. I love you more than life, he replied. Then he was gone. The waiting was agony. I paced the living room, watched the clock, jumped every time my phone buzzed. The guards stationed at the door were silent, professional, giving me privacy but never leaving their posts. 2 hours passed. 3. My mind conjured terrible scenarios. Dominic hurt, bleeding, dying. Me alone again, the brief happiness I'd found shattered by violence. Finally, at almost midnight, I heard the elevator. The door opened, and Dominic walked in. He was disheveled, his shirt stained with what looked like blood, his knuckles split and bruised, but he was alive, whole, home. I ran to him, throwing myself into his arms, and he caught me, holding me so tight I could barely breathe. It's done, he said into my hair. It's over. Marco won't threaten anyone ever again. I didn't ask for details, didn't want to know exactly what had happened in that warehouse. Some things were better left in the darkness where they belonged. Are you hurt? I asked instead, pulling back to examine him. Not my blood, he said quietly. I'm fine. We're fine. We're safe. He let me lead him to the bathroom, let me clean the blood from his hands with gentle touches. We didn't speak, but the